June 9, 1881, Sunday Herald, Baltimore, Maryland. Jensen the Ghoul. Conclusion of the interview on body snatching. Continued from yesterday. Reporter: during the 3 years that you were engaged in this resurrection business, how many bodies do you suppose you snatched? Jensen: about 500. Reporter: did these bring $15 apiece? Jensen: except for children, I never received less than $15, and when I shipped subjects, I got from $35 to $60 each. In special cases, too, I was paid handsomely. Reporter: from which cemetery did you get the most subjects? Jensen: from the Young Men's Christian Ground. The Georgetown Cemetery on the hill came next. I don't believe that there are a dozen stiffs left in that place, unless they were buried before the winter of 1877 or since the spring of 1880. Graceland yielded a good many, and Glenwood paid a heavy tribute. I only took a few from the Congressional, but made the Methodist grounds surrender a number. Even the Roman Catholic Cemetery, Mount Olivet, had to supply its quota, although it was very small. They have too high a fence around that place. It ought to be cut down. Reporter: do you then consider that a high fence is a safeguard against resurrectionists? Jensen: oh no, and as proof of it, I have taken stiffs from Mount Olivet, but the chances of detection are greater and the work harder. What is the use of walking on the cobblestones, incurring the risk of being run over, when you can go on the pavement? Reporter: surely the police must have known that you are operating on the cemeteries around Washington. Jensen: of course they did. Why, I have had policemen help me to carry stiffs into the college when I returned from a raid. I always treated them well, and they never interfered with me. After a big row there had been made once about a body that had been taken from the Congressional grounds, the chief told me to confine my operations to Potter's Field and let the private cemeteries alone. Reporter: please describe the modus operandi of resurrecting a body. Jensen: I generally knew the number of the grave where the interment had been made and could go right to the spot, but if I had any doubt about it being a new one, I had only to thrust my walking stick into it, and if it was the right one, I could push the stick down to the handle, but the earth on an old grave has settled and packed hard. I used this test constantly in the daytime when looking about the cemeteries for new graves. When I commenced this business, I used to leave the horse and wagon about a mile from the cemetery that we intended to raid, and after getting the stiffs, carry them to the wagon. But this took too long, was hard work, and increased the chances of being caught. So I abandoned all that monkey business and would drive right up to one side of the grounds, scale the walls, and make a rapid inspection of the place to see that no one was about, and then turn to and work. If there were flowers on the grave, we removed them carefully, laid the sod on one side, and dug down to the coffin as quickly as possible. I had shovels made on purpose, coming to a point like a trowel, with the flange running down each, so as to prevent any ringing noise when the earth was thrown from the blade. As soon as we reached the coffin, I would take a hatchet and break open the lid, then turn the stiff a little on one side. You can't pull it out straight. And haul it out, strip off the clothes, throw them into the grave, and fill it up. Then we rearranged the sod and flowers, and everything looked as peaceful as it did before our visit. At first, I used to carry rubber bags to put the stiffs in, but soon discarded that idea. The bags were only a trouble, and the stiffs could ride just as well laid on the bottom of the carryall. Sometimes, when we had a tall fellow, his bare feet would stick out behind the wagon, but before we entered the city we would squeeze them inside or cover them up with a robe. Reporter: did you never take the clothes too? Jensen: no, we had an idea that if we took anything from the grave except the stiff, that we were liable to arrest for stealing. This was one trouble I had with my men. They often tried to smuggle off a suit, but I watched them pretty closely. Reporter: did you never find jewelry on the bodies you took? Jensen: Very seldom unless it was a ring of small value. Reporter, were you not afraid that your men would inform against you? Jensen, oh no, they knew better than to do that. In the first place, they would lose their job, and in the next, they knew that I had too much influence at my back through the colleges to care a pin if I was arrested. Why, they had 2 of my men in lockup once, and tried to pump them, but my fellows remained true, and I soon had them free. The police arrested me once on a complaint some person had made, but I sent to the chief of police and to the faculty of Georgetown College, and was quickly released. Reporter, of course it is impossible for you to recollect the names of all the bodies you have taken, but cannot you remember some? Jensen, I can recollect a few, but really I never knew the names of the majority of the bodies I took. I had no interest in it. I wanted the subject, not the name. I could tell you the number of almost every grave in the private cemeteries that I emptied. Reporter, what do you mean by private cemeteries? Jensen, I use that term to distinguish them from Potter's Field, where only paupers and unknowns are buried. Reporter, have you those marked maps of which you spoke in the early part of this interview? Jensen, yes, I have them all, and they are at your service if you think they will be of any use to you. Reporter, are you sure that the graves marked have been emptied? Jensen, oh yes, there is no doubt about that. The only question is whether I have marked all that I did open. I tried to keep this record correct, so as to prevent my going twice to the same grave, but I may have omitted to mark some. I went so often to the different burial grounds that I had to keep some sort of record as a check on my spotters, and I thought this was as good as any, and told no tales to outsiders. Concluded.